I want to introduce our guest tonight, Dr. Greg Blonder. If you have watched us, you know is a PhD from MIT and Harvard, where he got his PhD, one time the head of the legendary Bell Labs, a lover of food science. That led him to our site when he contacted me about some technical matter. We hit it off, and we've been doing some fun stuff together ever since. I asked him to talk to us about something tonight that I think we are all interested in. It's something we all have in our kitchens. It's something we use all the time. Yet it's really a very magical ingredient. So I'm going to start with the simplest of all questions, Greg. What is salt?
Other than maybe water and air, salt is probably the most essential element for life. It's used in our bodies to signal. It's the way we pass electrical signals back and forth in the body. It's used as part of our metabolism. You can't live without salt. Too much salt is deadly. Too little salt is deadly. The really fascinating thing about salt is it tastes good too. And from a food point of view, we use salt for three reasons. One is we like the taste of salt. Second of all, salt enhances other flavors. And third of all, when you use salt and you brine meat, you can preserve meat, but most important, increase its tenderness.
Let's talk about how salt impacts food. When we sprinkle it on a piece of meat, like a steak at the dinner table, what happens?
First of all, when the salt lands on the meat, it starts to diffuse in. So on the right-hand side of this photo, you can see where it says table salt, and that shows you the rough size of a salt ions. Next to it is water, and as you can see, salt is about the size of water. If you skip over to, you see something which is called allicin, and allicin is the main flavor molecule in garlic. And you can see how much larger that garlic molecule is. And then to its left is sugar, sucrose, and to its left is blue dye number 1, which is very much like any other herb or spice. And here's the first thing you need to know about salt, is that meat is so dense that nothing larger than salt or water can get on the inside. As soon as you work your way up to allicin, sucrose, or blue dye number 1, it's basically stranded on the outside. But the main thing to know about salt is it's very tiny, it's electrically charged, it zooms into the meat, everything else sits on the surface. Here's the first major story to know, is salt is about the only chemical that's going to move its way from the outside to the inside. Curing salts, like sodium and potassium nitrites will as well, those little salts will go in, nothing else will. And second of all, even salt takes a long time to go in. And you might wonder, why do you cure corned beef for a week? Well, this is the reason why. If you wait less than a week, the pink coloring with the prog salts or regular salt will not make it all the way to the inside. And a classic mistake people make is they don't leave their corned beef in long enough, and when they cook it, the inside is brown and the outside is pink, because it never made it to the center.
What about the other things we put in our rubs? What about the garlic powder? What about the onion powder? The sugar? We know that sugar dissolves with the water that comes out from the meat. Do they get down into the center of the meat like salt does?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, 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 and slightly. The sugar absolutely does not make it in. That's a big, huge molecule. It does not get in. It's nice to put sugar in a brine, or even sprinkle it on the turkey before you cook, because it'll help the meat brown. The reason you put sugar in there is it doesn't make the meat sweet, but it does make the meat brown when you cook. So it's a good reason to do it. It doesn't not go inside.
Does salt chemically change the meat, other than, as you talked about, the denaturing of the proteins?
These are lumps of hamburger meat. They're about 3 inches in diameter. And on the left-hand side, it's just a plain lump of hamburger meat that I cooked in a 225 oven and waited till it got to 150 degrees. In white, it shows you how much weight was lost. It lost about 25% of its weight while cooking, and below it you can see pictures of the pan dripping. In the middle photo, I put on table salt on the outside of a piece of meat. Just sprinkled it on the outside. It's at the half a teaspoon per pound level, about the right level, and we can talk about why a half a teaspoon per pound is good. And if you take a look at that photo, you notice there's a quarter-inch band around the outside where the grain of the ground meat is gone. It looks uniform and smooth. And in the right-hand picture, I took the same meat, and I took the same amount of salt, half a teaspoon of salt per pound, but I gently mix it into the meat before forming the ball, so the salt's on the inside, like you were making a meatball or a meatloaf. Look at the texture of that meat. It looks solid. It doesn't have any grains or structure to it. However, look, it only lost 14% of its weight. And
so how did it taste?
It tasted terrible. The flavor was good, but the texture was a little bit leaden.
Salt and rub, although they're particulate and granular, are really very different and should be treated differently.
They should definitely be. And of course, as you know, most of the ingredients in the rub don't dissolve. They're granular particles, they're ground up leaves and herb stems. They're not going anywhere. They're going to sit on the surface. Whereas the salt is going to, if you give it enough time and it's moist enough, it'll disappear and go internals. And
the analogy that I try to explain is, look at you have a brake and a gas pedal in your car, and both of them control speed, but they control them differently, and you use them differently. And both salt and your rub impact flavor, but they work differently, and you use them differently, and they should be applied separately. And in the case of a thin cut, let's take a pork rib or a pork butt. We're going to use more salt on a pork butt because it's going to penetrate, and we want more salt to get down to the center. But we might use the same amount of rub on the surface per square inch on a pork shoulder as we do on the ribs, because it's a surface treatment and it's not going anywhere. I picked up a lot of good stuff. I really want to thank you for your time, Greg. I know you're very busy. I'm really fascinated by the new work you're doing and how much time you're spending on food science and the stuff that we get to see first on AmazingRibs.com. And a lot of that I will try to diffuse first into the Pitmaster Club. I hope you found this worthwhile. If you did, tell your friends. Consider giving it as a gift. I look forward to seeing you again next month, first Wednesday. And keep on cooking and stay in touch with us through the Pitmaster Club and your pit boss, Dave Parrish. And good night.